Okay. So, hello everyone. Today's episode, I would say I'm attempting to be more laid back in it. But it was very interesting that three titles approached me and I was thinking what to name the episode. The first title that arose to me was The Great Retaliation of Imagination Against the Void. Then this sentence arose to me, Roaring Truths at the End of Time. And then ultimately it led to the sentence, Is imagination imagining itself? Which I think is one of the most unique sentences ever. Right? One of the most mysterious things in this world is how imagination is being the meaning of reality. And so when human beings look at the concept and context of this, it's kind of shocking what's actually happening here on Earth. It's shocking as if its mystery extends beyond the memory that holds information as true. So technically this episode has three names. And those who've heard these talks of mine before, pretty much I start from the individual's reality and then inevitably it goes to the collectives. You see, we're living in a time in human history where, because we don't know what the mind is, we don't have a complete relationship with our world. So let's see how I can, in a laid back way, talk about imagination, imagining itself. A technique I use in pretty much all situations of my life, or I try to use it in as many situations as possible, is what I call the branch view and the sky view. I've named this recently. And to me, a very profound metaphor for the human mind is equivalent to a bird. Imagine there is an eagle. And imagine this eagle has landed on a branch and it has forgot that it used to fly. So this eagle is on this branch and it is identifying with the branch. It feels its wings are inactive. And so for a bird on a branch that is not flying, it's another way of saying reality has been believed into a static image. What I'm trying to say is that the branch view is how the eagle looks at the situation from the branch and then looks at the forest from the branch of a tree. The sky view is when the eagle flies into the sky and sees everything completely. Because we have to we cannot ignore our physical body. It's as if the human being is a shaped concept. I don't know how to say it. Oh man. If the human species knew everything, there would be no point of anybody speaking. The value of, I would say, communication and knowledge is in some sense like 8 billion people who have entered excuse me, 8 billion points of intelligence have been activated in a realm. You know, 8 billion creatures have attended an event that is not just existential, it is also experiential. The view from the branch, or I would say, in wondering about the concept and context of reality, in wondering how is imagination retaliating against the world, in an environment where reality was purely, where it seems that reality was purely existential, pretty much space somehow was here before anything else, and then something happened in space, and matter in some sense became a sort of manifestation of the interaction of forces beyond the conception of humanity. It's another way of saying that things happened, that it's, what it is, it's like it's like a human being born and not knowing what led to it being born. Do you see? It's as if like the past is designed to be a mystery for those who are present at the edge of the past, and the future is designed to be a mystery for those in the present. And really, at least this is one man's view from one corner of this universe filled with countless stars and galaxies, that our eyes are a cosmic oddity in a space that existed before existence manifested. When existence manifested, it led to circumstances where an object on a rock in the middle of nowhere, through evolutionary means, became a subject to itself. And the mystery of human consciousness is so bizarre, because why did the creature have a voice box? In some sense, why were we designed? Like, if you look at the legs and hands, you find a purpose to them. Sure, this creature needs to, in some sense, navigate or use its environment, or be able to move in its environment. When I think about the mouth, like, of the human being, sure, of course, food and all of this, but why speech? Why does a creature, like 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, have an ability to internalize the external world, in some sense, to receive the outer realms, and have this go into their inner realms, and then, before making a decision, contemplating the probabilities of how life can move behind their eyes, and then activating it and actualizing it in front of their eyes? Right? We're living in such a unique time that human beings are under the impression that they're just an objective form. It's as if it's like this contrast between imagination and reality. Let's say there is someone who, okay, here, I'll share a story. I'll create a story here. Let's just consider that back in the day, in some village in China, right, way back in the day, right, this, young kid, farmer's child, goes to the well at night to get water or something, and then he looks at the sky and sees like a phoenix or a glowing white dragon or something. Now imagine this child that saw this glowing white dragon in the sky goes to its father and says to its father, "Dad, I saw a glowing white dragon," right? And imagine the father's like, "Son, there's so much work to do in the farm that we don't have time to think about the unreal." And so imagine that kid goes on, doubting his own perception, people telling him dragons don't exist, you tripping kid, And so this kid goes back to the farm, right? And imagine if the kid's working or something, and this kid begins to wonder, wait a minute, How is it that when somebody, for example, says, I saw a phoenix in the sky, I saw a dragon in the sky, people are like, yo, man, that's imagination, that's unreal. But when it comes to, like, imagine you at a job interview being asked, who are you? Or somebody asking you, who are you? Right? That answer is as subjective as the concept of the dragon, as the concept of the phoenix, as the concept of any sort of fiction we have considered. You know what is bizarre? It's as if we think that fiction is imagination and imagination is unreal, but we don't realize reality is being held by fiction. The possibility of what can happen in the outer realms, it's fiction until it happens. Do you know? Imagine Edison, going to his, crew and like being like, yo guys, I'm gonna build this miniature sun, and people are like, get out of here, Edison. You think you can build the sun? You think? And imagine Edison does this, and people begin to see the light bulb for the first time. What was in the domain of the unreal, the moment it became real, it was as if never unreal. Do you know? Imagine like all those people who are, for example, let's say who are raised in the Christian tradition, and they have this belief that Christ walked on water, right? And now imagine that, people right now look, it's like no human being can walk on water, but imagine in the future they do something, they change some sort of, let's say they add some sort of nanotechnology, or change the human genetics, or change the elemental structures of the pond or something, right? And human beings can walk on water. Right? Imagine in the future, like you're gonna have ponds and lakes, and these ponds and lakes, like you can jump on the pond, right? But you can't fall into the water, right? Imagine it's like a futuristic government protocol, so that nobody drowns. So water, in some sense, you could jump on water and it'd be just like the ground, for example. What I'm trying to say is that something that was attributed to the imagination, which means it hasn't stepped out from behind your eyes into the real world. Now, the bizarre thing, this is something where I think on some level, somehow the cultures of civilization 1.0 are lucky that I am, giving these talks from an ivory tower. Do you know? Do you know what? Let me tell you why. Because if I sometimes I think if I was to go challenge the psychology of human conception, everybody would soon realize the idea of ourself is imagination conscious of itself. The free will is the ability for the movements of the world behind your eyes to be compared to the scenarios of the world in front of your eyes. And when somebody says imagination is imagining itself, the notion would be, in some sense, okay, so we have let's start from the existential position. There's a human being, constituted of, the periodic table, carbon-based life forms, right? And so it's as if we have the body's, atomic view. I remember I was listening, I'm going to, put this in the middle of this, but I'll tell you, like I was listening to a lecture from Richard Feynman, and Richard Feynman had a friend evidently who saw beauty in nature, right? In like a flower, and Richard Feynman couldn't see the same kind of beauty as like his friend was seeing in just like the presence of a natural flower, right? But Richard Feynman was arguing that the beauty he sees is all the atomic structure, all the design-oriented details that compose the flower. What I'm trying to say here is that when we look at the existential position, it's as if it was just objects due to unique circumstances. Most likely, I have termed this the on and off switch effect in the cosmos. It's another way of saying that the absence of light and its presence led to the huge development of the dualistic psychology of man. Do you know? But anyways, what I'm trying to say, there's a human being. Human being looks in the mirror, they see they're an object. Let's say they've woken up in the morning, they touch their hands, like let's say your right hand touches your left hand touches your right hand, and you're just seeing how you're an object. And then let's say you look at the world, and then the question comes, who is looking out through the eyes of the human experience, the human being? This is a question that actually throws you instantaneously, if you're courageous enough, into the unknown. Right? That means to me the difference between old souls and young souls is how the old soul was an unknown being to itself. The young soul was still a young soul. So, I'm trying to say, we look at ourselves, we see we are an object. This object moves, and as memories get created inside the brain, there's some sort of comparison system that goes on. It's kind of like, it's like there's no such thing as a person remembering. I would say it's more like what moments are still alive in your awareness. If one has the concept of time, sure, you remember something that happened yesterday, and you remember it today, you're like, okay, I remembered the past, right? You're like, that's my memory, yesterday's memory. Like, I drank a cold glass of water. It's like today's memory, I drank room temperature water. Imagine a person drinks room temperature water, but they're trying to remember how they drank cold water to get the sensation. What I'm trying to say is an object is moving. The object notices it's moving. It wonders what is moving. It has been conditioned and stationed ever since it has been given a name to be a subjective entity. Right? There's, like Jacques Lacan talks about the mirror effect, right? When a child looks in the mirror and it notices like it's an individual, right? Like it's like it notices the reflection is of itself. It can notice its outside. It can notice its reflection, pretty much, right? To me, I feel we should create this thing called the name effect. Okay? And the name effect is how when the child is named, it is actually given meaningless symbols to become. It is given a meaningless sound to become. You see, it's another way of saying the ego is coded initially through a name. You look at, for example, animals, let's say pet owners, and they not only have named their pet, they also have humanized their pet. Do you know? You see, something remarkable about human intelligence is that it cannot avoid the initial design it is when it comes to understanding things. For me in the future, I think the concept of understanding is up for huge philosophical debate. Like so many great philosophers may enter the global stage just wondering about what is understanding. Right now, when I ask myself, who am I? I'm like, okay, I'm this biological being just, sitting in front of a computer right now. So that part is like just there, right? Then I wonder about who am I, and then it comes like, okay, my real name. Okay, right now I'm using online alias Mr.Within, but like my real name is Amin. And so I think about, okay, who is Amin? right? And then I think about all my memories. So it's another way of saying the name of the person is the king of all their memories, to the degree as if like the king owns the whole kingdom. Whose memory was that? It's like that was Amin's memory. Do you see? I'm trying to say like an initial symbol is the first domino effect that sets into motion a subject that can interpret other things as a subject. Right now, I can touch my body. But if somebody was like, hey, Mr.Within, can you touch your ego? Can you touch your mind? I would be like, the mind is not something you can touch. It's just the awareness that is being the space where the body is found in. This is really what the mind is. The mind is the intelligent opportunity of space to notice itself, to notice what's in it. And if I cannot touch my mind, how can I experimentally, empirically test it? Do you know? From the knowledge of the past, the species goes into the future of the unknown, or the unknown future. Really, I'll be honest, this is my, I would say, most direct opinion on what's going on. And I think this opinion of mine would explain ancient mysticism. An object has no owner. It can't be owned by a name. The free will is actually not the free will. What is going on here is that any subject is hollow. And it's another way of saying that whether it's the concept of the world, God, whether it's the concept of the world, whether it's the concept of the self, the human being cannot ignore how the brain is performing. This is the brain's performance. It is not reality. What I'm trying to tell you is what we think we see is the brain happening. Do you know? But what is actually out there is independent. The true nature of reality is independent than whatever shapes are dependent on. Do you know? I'm trying to say that we are treating imagination as unreal, but our sense of how we are being real is the imagination of a moment. It's as if we are imagining reality, forgetting we imagined it, and then looking at imagination and being it's unreal, and somebody's like, is imagination imagining itself? What is this? You know, is some sort of force living a life through the human being irrelevant to the human archetype? It's as if there are questions to be answered. There is a strength to be gained. Do you know? I will tell you, for up to 2011, from 91, I wouldn't say I had an inferiority or superiority complex, but I would tell you that there was just this realization that all you can do in the meaningless is to in some sense exert a careless dance. You see, our body is temporary, so our value system arises from our mortality, how long we're going to be around, right? This creates the sort of immediate purpose to the physicality, right? But when we wonder about who is looking through our eyes, when we realize that the species doesn't know, and so it's as if an eagle on a branch thinks it's from the sky seeing the forest, but it has not realized the sky is not the forest. the nature of what we are and what is this force that is moving through our eyes, if we do not honor its unknown presence, knowledge will possess the temporary is possessing eternal meaning, which is in some sense in like it's technically impossible. What human beings are doing is impossible, or what is being the human being is actually impossible. Like, it's so strange to speak about. Whew. Sometimes heavy thoughts must be put down and picked up again. So let's just go under this assumption that, or let this consideration, that the great retaliation of imagination in the void is how an object in the void is having a separate relationship with other objects and therefore can become separate. It's as if like you look at trees, it's very hard. Okay, let's say trees were conscious. Let's say trees were in a humanized way conscious, okay? Like in King Arthur's legend, I don't know, like Merlin was trapped in a tree or some shit, you know? Do you know? So let's say like trees have some sort of personality, right? And now imagine somebody could speak to a tree, right? Or imagine Lord of the Rings scenario, but those trees were slow, you know? Like, let's say advanced, like, you know, brighter trees, you know? So let's say there's a tree that's conscious and somehow a human being says, hey tree, are you being a tree or are you being the whole earth right now? Which one are you being? The tree would most likely say, I am being the earth, right? But human beings have legs, right? We are creatures that can move on the world, and because we can move on the world, there is always a sense that we are separate from the world. That means it's because of the body that the concept of being in a world exists. But if the body was connected to nature in a way where, like, let's say a tree is connected to the earth, right? It's as if your connection renders you inseparable to what you're connected to. The biggest fear of the human mind that is strategizing for now through knowledge, it is in some sense the inconceivable, right? You know, in religions they say fear God, and atheists think that it means like fear somebody who's going to punish you. Do you know? But no, to fear God in religion, in religious cultures, like they say, religious traditions, they say that, like, I've wondered about this, right? Where how do religious people think about what wisdom is? And to a religious person, wisdom is the fear of the source, fear of the creator, fear of God. And so this fear of God, sure, if you personalize it, heaven hell can apply. But if you don't personalize it, it's another way of saying we are fearing the inconceivable primal movement of reality. It's another way of saying fear the life of the eyes of the world that we are just a sight. Fear of the inconceivable is a sort of like great challenge. You know, it's like the next Excalibur for future philosophers or advanced communicators and pilots to pull out of the void. Honestly, King Arthur's story is a perfect metaphor for how a creature became conscious. It pulled itself out of its environment. I think about what novelty is, and to me it just feels like memory repositioning, and also the addition of new dimensions. It's as if a person can remember the past, they can be the present, or they can in some sense visualize the future. The biggest issue on the planet is that most people are suffering because of their past and present, not realizing the value of the future. The future is such a divine idea. I don't know how to say it, but like, I'm a person who, if somebody tells me, what do you think about religion, Mr.Within, I'll be like, they're all time travelers. All of it is time travel pattern. Why? Because a time traveler it makes sense for a time traveler to come back to a savage species and tell it to be kinder, because in its kindness it's more gentle, in its gentleness it is more perceptive of all the dimensions of reality. The more perceptive you are of greater dimensions of reality, the less you have to be a violent animal, and the more you understand the mysteries of, in some sense, or the beauty of the mind. Like the mind has honestly, when I call it the inner realms, that's the best metaphor. It's a world. There's a world behind our eyes. There's a way life is happening, where it's as if, who is it that is aware of imagination and reality at the same time? It's as if like the inconceivable is looking at conception and wondering, okay, am I the conception or the inconceivable? And the answer is, if the conception moves, your conception. If the inconceivable, if there's a reversion to the inconceivable, then in some sense, you know what it is? It's like a person, it's like a body having a mind, and then that mind body wondering, am I a mind or a body? And the answer is that you are the body in the existential level, you are a mind on an experiential level. And the meaning of life that becomes devoid of direct experience is another way of caging evolution in the past. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is, a subject is believing that it is an object, but when it wonders about how it knows it's an object, the knower is not an object. We have no choice, because we have language, and language is a technology. We use this technology and we're like, okay, we're a subject. It's like matter's changing in space. Now it can change itself, and it uses a subject to, in some sense, pinpoint itself in the space-time continuum. You know what it is? It's like the purpose of existence is to experience it. The purpose of experience is for it to exist. The inner realms, it's as if behind your eyes you're like an antenna, and this antenna gets to see thought forms, okay, or subjects come and go quicker than objects. I never use the term believer, but I'm a firm knower, I would say, of a firm considerer of this idea that there is a speed. There is a speed behind your eyes to your inner life, and there is a speed in front of your eyes to your outer life. I think I was strangely privileged in this lifetime to discover the speed of my mind, to just notice it. It's very strange, but it's as if you live your whole life as if the story makes sense, and then suddenly you see a glitch in the matrix of your limiting beliefs. When the limitless visits you, that's a calling of an advanced civilization. To me, people may look at like native Amazonian shamans and be like, yo, these guys were so primitive, why listen to them? I would tell you, they were some of the most advanced beings on the planet. You see, it's as if the journey of human DNA through evolution has gone through a phase where it was being defined by the ecosystem. Now it is choosing to define the ecosystem as separate to the ecosystem, but any separate mentality is like an initial inefficiency. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the environment was moving us. Now we are moving the environment. Now we are moving the environment in such a complex way where there's like, communication and speech. And so now we're wondering what is moving the intelligence that is moving the environment. It's another way of saying what is moving your mind, that is moving your world. And when you look at the nature of physical phenomena, guys, sorry to break it to you, emptiness doesn't just exist beyond the clouds. Emptiness exists in the nature of how an object doesn't have to have any meaning. It's as if, imagine somebody calls you a good person and let's say somebody calls you a bad person, and it's as if the answer is, who says I'm a bad person? And then somebody says you're a good person, and then you say, who says I'm a good person? Somebody says you're this and that, and eventually, like, the person realizes, man, is language throwing, like, alphabetical paint? Like, my greatest purpose, really, that I have managed so far to fathom, like really what moves my soul, because you see in mysticism there's or let's say Buddhism, the Buddha is trying to get all his disciples and everybody on the planet to realize that the source of suffering is a causal position, it is not the effect. Right? Most people suffer because they think something is happening to them that is not from them. But Buddha was like, desire is the root of suffering, and where is the desire coming from? That means I'm trying to tell you that if you go to the source of your desires, and when I say a desire is not physical. Honestly, it's like an urge where you're trying to pinpoint from which memories it was created. So let's say a person desires freedom, and they realize this desire of freedom comes because when they were younger, they were not free. Okay? Now the Buddha's like, let go of your desires, and so the person has to wonder, should I let go of the desire for freedom? But eventually you realize what the Buddha had noticed was this dude realized so many people were trying their own ways to truth, and if you just sit still and silent, you get to have a contextual reset of what reality has to mean. Do you know? I'm trying to tell you that if a person lives as a moment of being, not as a person in a moment, you're going to notice archetypes cannot, the ego cannot be you after some point. The ego is within your attention, but it is not the full scope of the attention. What I'm trying to tell you is that what the ancients would say, the mind is a lousy master, but a great servant. Which is another way of saying, wonder about the greatest mastery of your mind. Right? This is my, like if there was a student, imagine any student who's like, why should I care about knowledge, Mr.Within? Because it is our only counterattack to an existential meaninglessness. To me, on some level, if a person chooses to live more emotionally, how do I say it? It's as if you look at the future and it doesn't translate into a thought, it translates into an emotion. Right now, what I envision in the future is that, imagine the future is a kingdom. Okay, and the future is all our great grandchildren's dreams and visions and advancements, right? So imagine the future of the human species is like a kingdom, right? And imagine there are other kingdoms, armies attacking the future of the human species. That means imagine there are some forces in this world that they don't care about, like, how can I tell you, religion to me is it's so generous, not revealing the full scope of the chaos and order that is in this world. Do you know? People who are, they think in religious books, the imagery is too intense or too messed up or savage. I'll tell you, the true nature of reality is so bizarre that human perception is maybe like less than 1% of it. There is like intelligent events taking place here that they surpass human storytelling. And because they surpass human storytelling, you're pretty much rendered being watching the unknown as the unknown. You know? Now imagine or here, I'll simplify this, what I'm trying to tell you. Imagine there's these two kingdoms, they're allies, okay? Let's call them H1, that's a human kingdom, and let's say we have H2. This is another kingdom, and H1 kingdom and H2 kingdom are allies. Okay. Now, the H2 kingdom is going under siege, and so it's another way of saying, if we were in H1, in the H1 kingdom, how would we defend our own future from subconscious influences in the realm? You see, people may be like, yo, there's no aliens, but I'll tell you, if you look at human behavior, none of it is human. None of it is normal. I am telling you, like all the other species, lesser species on this planet, they're looking at the human being like it's like, yo, who are these, strange creatures that have appeared, right? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Imagine like a lion passing by a construction place, and the lion's ears hearing the machinery construction noise and being like, what the fuck am I hearing? The lesser species are in awe of how much more we see in the world. It's as if the behavior of greater dimensions will never make sense to lesser dimensions unless the lesser grow or are welcomed into those greater dimensions. Now, I'm going to try to say the metaphor again. Imagine 2022, we have the present human kingdom, the kingdom of the human species, and we have the future of the human species. Let's say, give it a time span of like 4,000 years. Okay? It's as if, like, think of it this way, or I'll say it differently. I'm not going to give it time. I'll just say, imagine there is some intense battles or events that will take place for the future generations, right? And so it's another way of saying where, like, the role of the human being is not desire of the greatest self, it is desire of the greatest world. That's when you become free from samsara. The person was like, how do I escape the simulation? And the answer, there's two answers. One, you were never the simulation, never inside the simulation. Two, you become the simulation, and the simulation cannot be inside the simulation. That means the whole world can't be inside the whole world. The whole world can just be the whole world, right? So it's like this strange way where if reality was a hologram and a simulation, one way of getting out of it is really realizing you are the simulation. So then your free will has a way to change, right? Or in some sense, you were free from the beginning. This to me is the mystical enlightenment. And I don't know how many human beings on this planet ever wonder if they deserve to be ultimately free. Like, what is the ultimate freedom? What is the evolution of freedom for an entity? There is so much, like the human species, if it goes into like 100-year, 200-year research mode, And every person on the planet begins to have this honor of, okay, we're all like, in the same species. We all, there's like, we've all named ourselves, the sign of our civility. And so it's as if all that is left is to just, like an orchestra, to start playing. It's as if the only way to help our future, or to defend and guard the future generations, I think in the future, like in an advanced civilization, the police are going to be called the future guard. Guards of the future. Right? Because that is the purpose of hope. It's either the species fails, so it's like we couldn't do anything from the beginning, so whatever, you could do whatever you want now. Or the species succeeds, and we didn't know how it succeeded, it automatically did. Or in some sense, I don't know how to tell this, but like, God is how everybody in the future is everything. God is the future. It's like the future no longer being like countless lost souls, but being a sort of universal being. The remembrance of a universal being. Wow. Yeah. That's the path. That's the Mr.Within kind of command. Everybody is bestowed with a unique intelligence. I think this is where the culture and the fiction of normality, ever-changing normality, is in some sense like, if people for a moment put the story of their life on pause and notice that they don't know the full depths of their intelligence, then you would never be able to measure your intelligence. It's as if you can't be smart, or a smart person or a stupid person, because we don't even know what the person is. We don't know what consciousness is. It's just like something's happening as us, and we're like, it's just objects, and some people are like, no, it's not. And some people are like, it's just subjects, and some people are like, no, it's not. And the yogis are just sitting silently beside trees, being like, that's the way out. Can you imagine in the future, like imagine like the children of, all the billionaires on the planet had to go to this like meditation retreat, presented by the United Nations or something, the future United Nations. The future United Nations, its acronym is going to be fun. Honestly, what it is that I am just fathoming how not only is everything a story, not only everything is being chronologically kind of like stanced into meaning by like how the memories came about. It's like going from thinking you know or thinking you are knowledge, and then realizing you are, somebody should say it, unknowledge. I think I could be the first person ever to say it like that. It's like the person's like, I have a lot of knowledge, and then, let's say the enlightened guru is like, okay, and how much unknowledge do you have? How much have you noticed that meaning is attention's direction? The way your attention moves is another way of saying how meaning arises. The source of the attention is just presence. On an existential level, we're not even anything that can suffer. It's like, how can atoms suffer? How can neurons, neural synapses suffer? How can a complex how can a mysterious system suffer? Is this on mute? Oh my god. No, it's not. Imagine some, next level philosopher comes in the future and says, what if suffering suffers? What if the concept of suffering is suffering? What if you were someone who never had a concept of suffering? You'd be like, why are people so sad around me? It's like, oh yeah, they believe in suffering. And it's hilarious because if you can believe in suffering, why can't you believe in its opposite? I'm kind of like waiting to see when will the species notice that there is all this room for the future to be built, right? All that the future requests of the past is to love its destination. That has been the teaching of everything, It's as if you ask someone, do you love God? And the person's like, of course I love God, And, they're like, isn't God inconceivable? How can you love the inconceivable? And imagine some wise man interferes and says you cannot worship the inconceivable because the moment you know the inconceivable, you cannot be a conceivable entity. You become presence. Presence is another way of saying how the world is breathing, not just the human being. This universe is alive, and the dangers of not considering it alive is the sacrifice of the emotions that keep human sanity alive. You see, the world should not be treated as if we all know what it is. It should be treated as if we will never know, but we will try our greatest efforts to make sure that the future has a chance. It's as if it's like all the philosophers in 2022 decided to be like, okay, the society and politics and all of this. I have this, honestly, philosophers can create an advanced civilization. All they're required to do is to take the faith from a limiting answer to a limitless question. That is the great task of the philosopher, It's as if wonder is as if you found an Excalibur of your own to cut the sky and the simulation began to break, It's I don't know how to say it, but nature has an ability that if man realizes its simplicity of presence, it's honestly like an effortless, simple way where energy is being attention. Whoever you are, when you realize this, your soul starts resting. It's kind of how like this Tibetan sage Tilopa says something like, I don't know the exact quote, but it goes something like, after some point, there is no teaching, there is no teacher, there is no student. You just realize the true nature of something, and you bask in it. You abide by the presence of your being, which cannot be tainted by any subject that comes, because the subjective meaning needs two more than one memory, right? It's as if like if they ask a newborn baby, who are you? Like the newborn baby is just being the whole moment. It has no no character in a customizable game, Imagine somebody was like, what's confidence? And you're like, inner character customization. Oh, man. Okay. Is imagination imagining itself? Imagination is a mystery, but for me it feels like there is intelligent currents, and we are antennas that receive it. For example, right now as I'm speaking, these words that I'm vocalizing, it's as if they are inner events. It's as if I am looking at a film and putting it into words when I give these talks. But the film is how I am noticing the purpose of language was point to an image of reality. You know, it's as if the true way to learn is actually not only the concepts evolve, but the context of how the concepts are held evolve. And it's a strange duality, again, because it's like, okay, is imagination unreal, or is reality being imagined? Is the mind in the room first and then the body's occurring, or is the body in the room first and the mind occurs? But the situation is with consciousness is that really how we are being a person is how attention's interaction with its own senses. How do I tell you? It's as if your personality is how a world is entering an awareness where that awareness can choose to respond. You know, really what it is it's world translation into self, self-translation into world. In front of your eyes, you know, it's as if you are a physical world. Like, that can't be ignored. You know, if somebody comes and says, like, okay, let's say somebody asks me, who are you? I'll be like, I'm being part of the Milky Way galaxy right now. What's up? You know? Like, do you know, it's as if, like, on an existential level, everything's just being everything, you know, and it's all changing in the process. But in the inner realms, it's like, you know, the ability of attention to choose what it looks at. Really, the piloting of attention is the ultimate, is the summit of the intellect. It's like intelligence and energy doesn't know what to do in the void. And so there's 8 billion points of it, and each point of, let's say, each soul in the sector, you know, every conscious point of a universal sector is, in some sense, we harbor our inner realms, and that gives us an individualism to function in the outer realms. There's worlds behind everybody's eyes, and those who are wise, they realize these worlds behind our eyes come and go, you know. But those who are not wise, they get attached to how it comes and goes. So it's as if, like, maybe this is a good question for any truth seeker to ask, is that is enlightenment, what happens to emotions, let's say, post-enlightenment or post-self-realization? Self being the implication of your true nature. You know, I would like to read some quotes for the listeners. Sri Ramana Maharshi, guys, is one of the, it's the closest thing for the Western mind to an authentic yogi who attained enlightenment. And these quotes I'm going to read for you wonder about the nature of not just your reality, how your eyes have opened to the world, but wonder about the eyes of others, and you'll become fascinated that we're learning from the unknown in every moment. That is the true teaching. Ramana Maharshi says, if you think that this world is real because it appears, then conclude that mirage water also is real because it also appears. What difference is there between the two? So there's something I forgot to mention, guys. Ramana Maharshi was, it seems that, Carl Jung was, anyways, whatever, I'll just read the quote on it. Sri Ramana Maharshi says, nobody doubts that he exists. Excuse me. Nobody doubts that he exists, though he may doubt the existence of God. If he finds out the truth about himself and discovers his own source, this is all that is required. Ramana Maharshi says the ultimate truth is so simple, it is nothing more than being in one's natural original state. Sri Ramana Maharshi says silence is ever speaking. It is a perennial flow of language. It is interrupted by, in brackets, human speaking. These words obstruct that mute language. Ramana Maharshi says the end of all wisdom is love, love, love. Ramana Maharshi says correcting oneself is correcting the whole world. The sun is simply bright, it does not correct anyone. Because it shines, the whole world is full of light. Transforming yourself is a means of giving light to the whole world. Sri Ramana Maharshi says if you go on working with the light available, you will meet your master as he himself will be seeking you. Ramana Maharshi says wanting to reform the world without discovering one's true self is like trying to cover the world with leather to avoid the pain of walking on stones and thorns. It is much simpler to wear shoes. Ramana Maharshi says the two states, waking and dream, are filled up by forms and names, which are the creations of the restless mind. Therefore, they are alike unreal. Ramana Maharshi says doubts arise because of an absence of surrender. Sri Ramana Maharshi says if one wants to abide in the thought-free state, a struggle is inevitable. One must fight one's way through before regaining one's original primal state. If one succeeds in the fight and reaches the goal, excuse me. If one wants to abide in the thought-free state, a struggle is inevitable. One must fight one's way through before regaining one's original primal state. If one succeeds in the fight and reaches the goal, the enemy, namely the thoughts, will all subside in the self and disappear entirely. That's it. That's it, guys. That's it. this quote says so much. Oh my God, guys, this is like a whole episode, this quote. Pretty much Ramana Maharshi says, you go through karma, and it's as if you seek freedom, but because you seek freedom, a struggle is inevitable. And he's saying that you must fight one's way through. This is in some sense having a faith, or in some sense there is a purpose behind the strength that carries the present into the future. Ramana Maharshi says, in your journey to your original primal state, if you succeed in the fight, and pretty much he's saying if you are able to notice how everything is happening, you'll realize it all goes back to the self. Here he says will all subside in the self and disappear entirely. What does that mean? That means the journey of this hero in this cosmos went to a point where everything returned to the self. Do you know how people are like when they die, like their whole life rewinds in front of them? It's because it's all starting from the self. Like the self is the first domino. Do you know? And the self, everything is extended out of it and everything returns to it. And for all religious people who believe in God, it's as if everything started from God and returns to God. It's another way of saying God is the inconceivable viewer that has been moving matter and mind. That means the reason I think, at least as let's say, someone who's saying, sure, let's contribute to theology, it's as if the soul is how God watches everything. Maybe Excalibur has been pulled by me saying that, I don't know. But anyways, Ramana Maharshi says of all the thoughts that rise in the mind, the thought I is the first thought, you know? This is why I think, you know, polite people are so egotistical, you know, they're like, I? Yeah. Oh man. Ramana Maharshi says, he whose pure mind turns inward and searches whence does this I arise, knows the self, and merges in you, the Lord, as a river into the sea. Yeah. You know what it is, guys? It's like as temporary beings, we're like, no way. This whole time we've been inconceivable, you know, eternal space intelligence. It's like, who knew? You know, who knew a field of activity was moving the particles of meaning? You know, it's like, it's remarkable that our mind is our collective life and our body is our individual life. And when these two synchronize, it's how the poet Rumi says, like, just like a bird needs two wings to fly, the mind requires chaos and order to function, something like that, right? So it would be as if we need the collective mind and the individual body to flap like the synchronized wings of destiny, you know. It's as if the species has to become responsible for how the whole species has an identity, but its identity is interstellar. That means it's like the smartest thing human beings can do is in some sense love the world to see how hatred exists. And then the greatest technologies come about. You see, it's as if like the biggest challenge to understanding is how the person can be freed from their emotions that set the limits, that create the acceptance of their limits. And so it's imagined like from a non-emotional, non-subjective, pure objective position. Okay, you're being in the world, and it's as if purpose is just how energy exerts itself. It's like the meaning of life is just effort towards an inconceivable continuity. It's as if, imagine, you know, imagine like, you know, a rock star professor okay, here I'm trying to say the purpose of the biological program is reproduction. Meshing this concept with the notion of the infinite continuity of the species means the purpose of human beings is to create human beings everywhere, biologically, as long as possible. People are afraid of like overpopulation, but I'm telling you, like in my strategy called Civilization 2.0, I've turned it. Like there's a book on this, and I pretty much see it the moment we build sky cities, overpopulation wasn't a big deal. It's as if, you know, nature naturally led to the unnatural development of technology, you know? And now the unnatural development of technology is wondering about its source, and it's discovering the natural. You see, the unnatural returns to the natural. The natural creates the unnatural to advance. It's as if you can say, like, how do I say it? I don't know. I'll just continue with the code tunnel, guys. Visionary futurism will build paradise on earth. Ramana Maharshi says, if one can only realize at heart what one's true nature is, one then will find that it is infinite wisdom, truth, and bliss, without beginning and without end. Ramana Maharshi says, it is not enough that one surrenders oneself. Surrender is to give oneself up to the original cause of one's being. Do not delude yourself by imagining such a source to be some God outside you. One's source is within oneself. Give yourself up to it. That means that you should seek the source and merge in it. Ramana Maharshi says you need not aspire for or get any new state. Get rid of your present thoughts. That is all. And you know, it's not possible to get rid of the present thoughts. It's possible to realize you're a presence beyond thought. That's possible. Ramana Maharshi says the mind is only a bundle of thoughts. The thoughts have their root in quotations, I thought. Ramana Maharshi says, whoever investigates the origin of the I thought, for him the ego perishes. This is true investigation. The true I in quotations is then found shining by itself. Right, just like how we don't think about our heartbeat, pretty much Ramana Maharshi is saying you're going to realize how truth has already become second nature before our nature doubts its nature, you know. Ramana Maharshi says, seeing God without seeing the self, one sees only mental image. Only he who has seen himself has seen God. since he has lost individuality and now sees nothing but God. Yeah, you know why? Because the human idea is just such a small thing in the cosmos. You know, like truth doesn't necessarily have to make sense to a human being. You know, human beings think they have to hug truth, and then that's truth. You know, truth is just how there's dimensions to reality that, in some sense, were forgotten. It's as if we are new beings in an ancient world, and the more we live here, we get to experience the spirit of the realm, right? It's as if to surpass limits, to build a civilization that honors the skill of advancement in any dimension, right? Like that's like, you know, if we don't care for the advanced, we miss out on the potential, right? That's the saddest thing. The saddest outcome is like the species never trying to see what the best case scenario is. You know, I've declared that every idea in the outer realms is going to come to the advanced civilization. These two words are, you can say, both the secular and non-secular societies. It is in some sense like the gift of the future. That means, imagine, like in the future, in a parallel universe of Earth, okay, like aliens invaded human beings and they were shocked. All the aliens that invaded human beings, they were so shocked and honored by how human beings were living that they couldn't just invade them. Imagine. And imagine, like, at first the aliens land and they're trying to invade human beings, and they see every member, every human being in this advanced civilization is has such access to probabilizing everything in such an advanced way that it's as if our species, by the nature of what it knows itself as, has outwitted the folly of you know, let's say galactic greed. What I'm trying to tell you is that we can live in such an advanced way that the future generations, like the history books, would be like, no way, in 2022 suddenly people started living in such an advanced way, where it was as if, like, you know, you know, it was as if a sudden boost, you know. It's like the species jumped into the air, it got to recognize itself and the world, and then the functions of an advanced civilization occurred. And let me tell you, there's something for the mind, because on some psychological level, the human being's just, you know, just an entity existing, you know. Everybody's just like existing to experience, right? Like that's kind of like the first principle to honor in life. It's like life, it should be allowed to be alive, right? This is like the most important commandment of the future. Do you know that life must be guarded, right? This is so important. You know, all the like, if in the future, like, let's say some technological companies, they create immortal technologies, their marketing shouldn't be like, yo, come and access your own paradise. Like that would be a sad thing to see. It's as if that in the future generations, the tech sector is going to become, like, the attitude is going to become equivalent to, like, you know, a disciple of the advanced civilization. Do you know? In my science fiction, guys, I write about what I have termed the enlightened society. And the enlightened society occurred, this isn't, oh my god. The enlightened society I'll just let people read it. Yeah. The idea was that a politician, the first politician among many politicians in the world, like an artist became a politician, like a global leader, and then this global leader started to create the most incredible, like, beautiful, geometrically magnificent type of civilization. Like, so imagine like one artist decided to create the greatest artwork, and all the other artists, nations, instead of putting the financial budget, you know, in let's say in military, they incense like, imagine nations were competing not against militaristic power, but they were competing against which nation was smarter and more beautiful, you know, more incredible, right? Like, just think about that. Imagine, like, I'm waiting to see, you know, a one world leader, somebody in the UN be like, all right, guys, we're a species in a masquerade party of nationhood, right? And so, you know, it's as if, like, we must, alongside the narrative of being individual nations, like, we don't need to change anything. We just need to add the context that it's as if, from the perspective of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we are universal beings in the first place. So that means not only should the species have an affiliation that we're not just people and nations, we're a species in the void, on a rock in the middle of nowhere, you know, marching against time. Like, that's the reality, you know? It's like everything else is just what sticker of a thought you put on the imagery, but in reality, it's just creatures on a rock wondering about their greatest strategy. It's as if to be a member of an advanced civilization, your heart must have concluded that the advanced civilization is a collective victory. Do you know? It's as if when the world wins, nobody lost in it. That's the genius of the future, guys, right? That means the future is so smart enough, like, instead of suffering in a world of incapability, it will just change the world into a world of capability, and suffering is just sidelines, you know? The greatest retaliation of imagination against the void is another way of saying what is the greatest vision of the consciousness of life in this universal sector. You know, in these talks of mine, I talk about the advanced communicator, and the way I say it is that in actuality, the advanced communicator is what we term as the most advanced communication of the universal sector. Do you know? It's like a title given to that. Right? When we look around us, human intelligence is like, yo, it's, you know, the highest level. It's as if we're like, human intelligence is the final level of this video game of animalhood, you know? You know, the final boss is samsara, you know? And what will end up after the great retaliation of imagination against the world, against the void? Pretty much what happens is that, this is at least one person's opinion, I honestly think the best case scenario is how the best case scenario of every human being was activated. It's another way of saying, like, imagine human beings being mortal on a planet. It's like we are all tourists, okay? Imagine, like, unknown beings that have become tourists in the embodiment of a biological life form, you know? So I'm saying, imagine, like, people are travelers in the world. They've come to visit this world. They're not from this world, okay? So the government, or let's say a sort of world authority, would look at this situation and be like, okay, everybody's like a tourist on a vacation, and so could it be that, like, in some sense, the whole planet needs to be designed to make the journey of these tourists, you know, these human beings that are like roaming the earth, in some sense. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that what is controlling mankind will realize that if mankind is given freedom and somehow creates a system it can trust, it's as if, like, something, which I think literally the only word I could say, something transcendental, metaphysical will happen, you know? It's as if it's like, you have this, let's say, machine with different light bulbs on it, and so it's as if the person wondering how would this look like if it was like all the light bulbs were turned on to the max. The species, its choices are, it either waits for extinction or it realizes there's a life beyond the clouds waiting on us. Can you imagine what it's like? Imagine like you're walking your dog. I don't have a dog, but I'm saying imagine that, you know, listeners can imagine if they're pet owners. Imagine you're walking your dog and you suddenly, let's say you're walking your dog in New York, okay? And as you're walking your dog, you suddenly see this giant shadow come on the park, and you're like, okay, this shadow doesn't make logical sense. You turn around and you begin to see, in some sense, skyscrapers lifting into the air, as if visualize the first sky city, you know. And then imagine being the first child born on a sky city, as if your whole life you're just waiting, like so grateful to just go and see what the earth is like, right? It would create the most purest generation of grateful, like, you know, advanced beings. The psychological implications of a sky city, like, do you know how many senior citizens, like, just if we just had that technology right now, senior homes would just be floating all around the world, you know? Like everything becomes a moving journey. Like in the future, you know, like right now, let's say children, you know, they take the bus to school. In the future, there's going to be, imagine like the school is just going to hover on top of the neighborhood, and all the children are just going to jet back to it or something. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's like the future is in the hands of the now. On some level, existential level, there's nothing to say. Existence is just happening. On an experiential level, every person that is starting from their inner world, their inner universe, it's as if you climb out of your inner universe, you come to what I would say a sort of universal neutrality. And then it's as if from simple levels of observation, you build, how can I say it, naturally a layered system ends up happening. I don't know how to explain this. The mysteries of the self lead to the unknown. The unknown is inconceivable. The inconceivable has no conception of action. The inconceivable is being. It's another way of saying the human experience can live a way where it's just being before it's doing anything, right? Like the truth is kind of pre-illusion. You know, can you imagine two eternal beings being like, man, you remember those pre-illusion, you know, pre-simulation days, you know? Where everything was being everything before everything could not be everything, you know. In the trenches of Civilization 1.0, in the language wars of 2022, amidst the battlefield of language that has entranced and enchanted a species from its, you know, supreme birthright of knowing what it is. What we need in this world is no longer outer revolution. In the outer realms, the more peaceful you are, the more you're giving a chance for the genius on the planet to activate, right? Cruelty destroys ability, thinking under the illusion that it's able, you know. It's like there's a level in, how can I tell you, I think there's just the state where if we create a system where in an effortless, simple, pleasant way, the conditions of culture could function. It's as if, you know what it is? It's as if we need a Zen monk, you know, with a bell in every, you know, Wall Street, you know, angry business boardroom meeting, you know. It's a dance between manifestation. Reality is a dance between simplicity and complexity. It's a dance between the known and the unknown. It's the dance between the conceivable and the inconceivable. It's the dance between the individual and the collective. You know, it is the dance between existence and non-existence. It's the dance between the experience and the experiencer. It's the dance between the object and the subject. Do you see so many ways the human intelligence can lends itself through duality? The world needs explorers. That's the greatest teacher. If anybody asks in the future, I'm going to conclude that's the greatest outer realm teaching. You know, somebody's like, I'm suffering. You're like, okay, go explore and see what else is there more than your suffering. Do you know? I don't know who it was, but I remember seeing this video on like YouTube Shorts or something. I don't know where it was, but it was this video where this athlete was saying something so profound. And the person was saying that, like, when they were a kid, their mother had told them that if everybody on the planet threw their problems into like one heap, everybody would take their problems back, as if everybody would become grateful when they see the intensity of the ways the human intelligence is functioning, right? The more the human effort goes towards becoming a sort of collective mind, the more we have to care for all the inner realms that are in the realm, you know? It's as if, imagine somebody cares for their own mind, cares for their own body, and they're like, great, you know, now what would be a more advanced version of that? You know, okay, so you care for all biological entities in the realm, you know, animals included. Like, the human species should find a way to replace like meat somehow. You know, like that's one of those things Silicon Valley needs to figure out, you know. Imagine an advanced civilization has the best food that, like, it's the most efficient way food can be composed for the human body. Imagine. It has the best, I mean, the idea, pretty much, guys, what I'm pretty much saying is, like, I found this algorithm that in any situation of life you can wonder about what would the more advanced version of this be. Right now, imagine in every situation of life, whether it's somebody, you know, drinking a cup of tea, or whether it's somebody, you know, being like a tech business mogul or something, you know, whoever you are, right? It's as if, like, once you're done with the games of self, when the ego has been satisfied, the ego will get bored. When the ego gets bored, it thinks its satisfaction has to still be through consumption. But the idea really in this life is that if we saw money as energy, this energy, in some sense, it goes to a peak. It's like a wave, and then it falls down, and then it goes up and it falls down. Do you know? That means, imagine a sort of system, okay, where it's as if the advanced civilization was like, okay, how can we, like, fix the economical dimension of human beings' lives, right? And imagine thinking money is the currency, but no, the actual cost of everything, guys, is the energy it takes to be that moment. It's the cost of time and energy. That means it's like the price of money is time and energy, right? And now, money, something I thought about, like, guys, I've sometimes thought about, like, okay, what's capitalism destined for? You know, is capitalism destined for greatness? You know. to me, inspired by, let's say, video game culture, I thought about the future in some sense. What's going to replace money is something known as honor points. You know, what that means is a point system is going to replace money, right? Especially if the future generations stop caring for mathematics, you know, like. A point system, an honor system, and the species is just focused on the advancement of skill. That means skill becomes, I mean, it already is something that we universally honor, right? I remember I saw this parkour video on YouTube that had like millions of views, and I'm like, it deserves it, right? And you begin to see like human beings doing things that human beings haven't seen be done before, right? That's what we are drawn to. We are drawn to infinite ability without realizing it. It's like the subconscious desire that lurks in our subconscious. It's as if the person looks at emptiness and it's like, okay, there's nothing there. You know, then the person looks at reality being singular, and then they're like, okay, if everything is being everything, what's the point of the human being? So technically there's nothing there too. And then you come to duality and you wonder, why is chaos and order in some sense like happening at all, right? And so it's as if you begin to see the existential conditions of again, I pointed to earlier, the on and off switch effect, and you begin to see that the psychology of the human being is pretty much very strangely binary, right? Where it's pretty much on, it's like aware, conscious, unconscious, conscious, unconscious. Even every time we blink, let's say somebody closes their eyes for like, let's say you blink in like a nanosecond or something, you know, it's as if in that nanosecond the brain was like nothing there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the whole system is being shocked on and off to be generated. The relationship of unknown attention and known energy. The relationship of a mind that is not an object moving an object, it is a subjective consideration on the world that gives momentum to the object. It's another way of saying that imagination, sure, it's not real, but how it's happening is real. Do you know that means why is it here? Why can we see more than our environments behind our eyes? You know, we can see more than the outer environment and function in it. Like, why is that even there? So it's as if, why does the concept of imagination exist? And that's when reality and imagination, they're just modes of perception. It's just based on how the context of how the individual's mind is contexted. Those people who are, let's say, low energy on the planet, most likely okay, here, I want to make a judgment. I'll say that, like, some people's minds are contexted in the zero dimension. That means nothing has become important for them. Do you know? There's some people who their context of their mind functions through a singular dimension, and these people are what you call like the grateful, lucky, and deserving. Right? Those who go into a sort of singular relationship with the forces of nature, they are not, there is no ego generation. It's as if you're living as space before you're living as a collective field of being, rather than being a human being only. Do you know? Rather than living just as a human being. You're being the field. That's the sort of singular contexted mind. Right? Now the dualistic contexted mind is culture, civilization, speech, self, and worldhood. Okay? Now, the infinite context is when the person has noticed the zero dimension, one dimension, two dimension, the duality of reality, and now only infinitude is left. This is really why I say, like, the smartest people on the planet realize the use of human intelligence. It's just, it leads to everybody's, like, those who love the world truly, they become futurists. Those who are not futurists, it's as if they haven't cared to see where the species is going. It's as if imagine a narrative, making the human being so small that it feels it doesn't deserve to participate in a cosmic event. Advancement, an advanced civilization is the birthright of the future, is the future's birthright. Advancement in general, just in any field. Imagine somebody's like, oh man, I failed. And then, the algorithm would apply, the advanced algorithm, and they'd be like, okay, what's a more advanced way of failure, right? And then they'd realize the most advanced failure is to fail to fail. It's like the secret of the radius is that every point on the circumference can be connected to the center of the circle. Is imagination imagining itself? Is reality realizing itself? It's just an unknown collective intelligence where it's as if, how I feel? I feel right now we are looking out through our biological eyes so comfortably and simply. In the future generations, they're gonna have an additional dimension of sight. And that additional dimension of sight, if it's information oriented, it will pretty much lead to the psychology of an immortal being. But if it is, in some sense, it's as if it's as if a free world doesn't have a concept of freedom. Any idea can be applied to itself. Any idea can be squared, right? That means, for example, you take the idea of philosophy and you square it, so the philosophy of philosophy, Or you take the concept of art, you square it, it becomes the art of art, I think this could be a way where we could, connect exponents to the alphabet. Or to, I should say, words. Imagine you square the concept of God, the God of God, Or you square the concept of an advanced civilization, the advanced civilization of the advanced civilization. The mind has an ability to recognize the potential, the presence of infinitude and unconscious and unknown. In every moment there's a hidden genius angle, and the idea follows that if somebody's, let's say, doing something and they think that there's somebody on the planet who's doing it better, that means a better way exists, right? So the assumption that a better way always exists is like crucial in realizing motivation, is how you see your life force. It's as if the relationship of life with its future is like the journey of its soul. The journey of the soul. Upon the great retaliation of imagination against the void, human beings are left having just this option of how much effort there wants to be, how much there wants to be an effort for just the better. I don't know how to say this. Does a species in the void that has recently had language acquisition, could a creature making mouth noises, which it's internally like translating into words of meaning, it's as if like where is the edge of creaturehood? Where is the edge of the sky? And so in the outer realms, unreachable in front of us, but in the inner realms, your eyes are the edge of the sky or the meaning of the sky, you know. So imagine if it's an inner realm, outer realm, there's an outer sky and there's an inner sky. To appreciate the possibility of the worlds behind our eyes is like a great way for a person to honor the realm. You know, it's as if to me, let's say the religious person says the man who prays is like the greatest man. I would tell you the explorer is the greatest man. You know, because it was as if it was an act of exploration, the consideration of revelation. You know, it's like ink on a piece of paper, and how could all religious people have the same view on religion to be part of the same religion, right? And so it's a sort of theater that is like how can I tell you, true religion is like, I think, a mirror. A mirror where when you look at it, you're not just seeing the truth of yourself, you're seeing the truth of the universe. You're seeing the truth to every concept your mind has ever known. It's like the last staircase of paradise is the inconceivable. The staircase to paradise. It's so remarkable. The human story could totally be turned into an anime, you know. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. This was a long episode. Much blessings and namaste.